Hi guys. So again, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, but more importantly, thank you so much to the people that took the time to sponsor me on my trip to Morocco. I appreciate it so much, and I know the charity does as well. So far I think I managed to raise about £400. So that's great, and so thank you again. I couldn't have done it without you guys. So basically I wanted to kind of make this video in part to make it for the people that took the time to sponsor me, so you'd know what I did during that week and you'd know what that money goes towards. And also kind of as a last final plea to those of you who haven't yet sponsored me, the sponsorship page actually is going to stay open until the 6th of July, so if you wanted to head over to that page and make a donation, especially after watching this video, that would be very much appreciated. So basically, as I said before, I was working with the Hannan charity, which focuses on education for the village of Borj and the Berber people. And this school helps about 25 kids and sponsors them in order to have the materials they need to go to school, and they run the school as well. Last year's money that was raised went towards building actually an entirely new floor as well as a rooftop play area. So that's great. So this year what the main focus was to get those rooms set up and ready for children, to get the resources set up, and also to like hang out and teach the teachers how to teach essentially, or help them with their teaching methods. So you know me, I'm not the greatest when it comes to kids. They kind of terrify me a little bit. So I instead put my effort into painting, which was much better for me. I painted a castle, one which was stenciled on the wall for me, but still I filled in those lines with paint that was probably not meant to be inhaled for as long as I inhaled it. But you know, it's all in the name of charity. So if you have me on Facebook, you can probably go and see pictures of the castle that I painted. It did turn out quite well, if I do say so myself. But again, as I said in the last video, the main reason why I went on this trip was to have the opportunity to talk with the women of the village about domestic violence and basic first aid and that kind of stuff. And I did do that. We did 2 workshops over 2 days, and the first workshop was actually really quite overwhelming. It wasn't how I thought it was going to be, because I kind of had the thought that these women didn't know anything about domestic violence, didn't even realize that being beaten by their husband was a bad thing, and we'd come in and say, you have these rights and you shouldn't stand for this, and they'd be like, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't, and everything would be fine and hunky-dory. And that was probably a silly belief on my part. Essentially, after we kind of explained domestic violence, explained the laws, a lot of women said that they were in fact familiar with the laws, whereas, you know, others were not. But most of them, there was kind of the recurring sort of statement that, you know, regardless of whether they knew about the laws or not, the main cause for those, the domestic violence, was usually poverty, and they would constantly fight about money between the husbands and wives, and even when they would leave the house and come back, the problems would still exist. So hearing this was quite hard, because obviously I can explain the laws, I can explain why they don't deserve to be in violent situations, but I can't stop poverty, I can't solve it for them. And after that first day, it was really frustrating, because I honestly didn't know how to really change anything. And then after that we had the first aid talk, which I realized after that how I truly take for granted how certain things seem logical to us, but really apparently are not. Like we taught them how to deal with wounds, and we asked them what do they do when they have a wound, and one woman said put bleach on it. So that was terrifying and awful. And another woman said how when her baby has a fever, she wraps it in more blankets. So obviously the first aid stuff was very much needed, and I'm hoping that they remember some of the stuff that we taught them, because obviously it's basic but hugely important. So the next day, we decided to, rather than focusing on teaching them specific laws and stuff about domestic violence, we wanted to more get them to focus on kind of taking steps to get out of poverty, or at least take steps to support each other. So what we wanted to do was try to get the women organized to create like a monthly women's meeting, just so they could at least get together once a month and talk about the problems that they face, talk about issues with their children, talk about issues with their husband, and just in general talk about how they can maybe change their situations. Because ultimately, as a charity group, we're only there for 1 week and we leave, and they're left to continue on with their lives. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a framework in place to keep these women going once we weren't there. But the most important thing was first to get them out of this mindset that they're poor and that's the end and there's nothing that they can do about it. So Hamad, one of the founders of the charity, who actually grew up in the village, he told them his story about how he, grew up with nothing, but because he focused on education, because he studied hard, in spite of everything, he was able to get out. And so I told my dad's story as well, and kind of gave a similar story as to how, my dad grew up with very, very little, but he had to study on a bridge because that was the only place he had electricity. But because he focused on his education, he eventually ended up becoming a surgeon. And so, poverty, while it can be crippling, it doesn't necessarily have to be the end. And I think actually those stories did really help the women, just to kind of see that, as bad of a situation as you're in, there is hope that you can get out of it. So after that, we asked for volunteers, and actually some women did come forward to be the leaders of this group, and from there we kind of just got them to start talking. And it was actually really amazing how once you just kind of give them the spark, they kind of ran with it, and they were really kind of interested in talking about their issues and all of that. And at the very end, when they were saying, thank you for coming, thank you for teaching us these things, one woman actually said, thank you so much. We would never have been able to, we wouldn't have even really thought that coming together and speaking was going to be a good idea and helpful until you guys came and you told us. So thank you so, so much for that. And we did a lot of really worthwhile things throughout the week, but I think for me personally, that one sort of event really made the entire trip worth it and made me feel like I actually did do some good. So that was really great, and I hope that those women will continue the meetings and eventually come together and get out of the bad situations that they're in. Maybe not immediately, but they can at least support each other and support their children through education, because ultimately that's what is going to make the biggest difference. So that was my week. Oh yeah, and I went on the 30-kilometer hike and I nearly got heat stroke, so that pretty much makes me the worst ethnic person ever. But that's okay. I did finish it, did do the 30 kilometers. It was hot, so hot, but it was good, and I'm glad that I did it. So yeah, this video is getting really long now. So again, thank you so much for donating. If you haven't, please do. It genuinely is a really great charity, and to be able to see exactly what your money is going towards is really great. It does get used quite well, and it goes directly to helping these children who need it. So thanks again!